Lovely people, welcome back to another Story Study Saturday. I'm Sammi and I'm a writer who likes to learn about writing through reading and share what I learn with you. This week I am talking about The Sunken City, which is a book that I won on a giveaway on Goodreads in Kindle format, and I just never really picked it up. I knew I wanted to read it, but there were just other things that were drawing me in more. So I just got around to it, even though it's been months since I won it. I did win it before I realized that I'm a pirate girly, which new discovery if you haven't been along on the journey. I like books where girls be on boats, I guess. Pirates or otherwise. And this book starts off with our main character on a pirate ship. So probably could have picked it up sooner, but we're here now and that's what matters. So for a quick summary, Amare is an orphan being raised by her uncle, the captain of a pirate ship. He's spent her 17 years of life protecting her from the dangers being a pirate, or worse, a woman, can bring, until her curiosity sparks and she encounters a treasure that completely changes her physically into a human-like species that lives 267 miles underwater, in a kingdom that her long-lost father is the king of. Can she adjust to her new life? Maybe. What about the fact that her arrival to the Sunken City is the first step towards freeing a sea witch whose only goal is to raise the oceans and cover all of the earth with seawater to rule the world? So let's get into my thoughts on this one. I gave this book 3 stars. There is a lot in the writing style that just doesn't mesh with me, and a lot that I thought could be stronger, so we will go into that in the improvement section. But the story had me invested the whole way through, that I was able to look past a lot of the things in the writing that I was like, wow, I don't like that, to continue reading and continue to care about the characters and what they were going through and what they were working towards. So it's like 50-50. I probably could have given it a 2.5 stars, but I like to round up. It lost the 2 stars because of the writing style not really vibing with me, but the story got it back up to 3 instead of being a book that I didn't finish. Something that I enjoyed about this story is that the conflicts constantly is raising the stakes of the situation. As one conflict makes its way out of your direct line of sight, another steps in that has higher stakes and takes more precedence. And so you're constantly in this cycle of trying to solve the problem. And in trying to solve the problem, you gradually get to finding worse problems. That kept me very engaged throughout the whole story, and a lot of the conflicts were very interesting in the way that they appeared, in the way that they were overcome for some of them, and in the way that they were reacted to, and how other people around Amare reacted to them. Something that I think really made me engage with this book is that Amare's flaws are not hidden behind her good features. She's very much a genuine person. Like, the things that aren't good about her are equal to the things that are good about her. It's not like one is outshining the other. And seeing the way that those things navigate and interact with each other makes it more engaging to me and makes me care more about Amare, because she feels like a real person. And she doesn't feel like a main character to a story most of the time. There are a lot of times that she does, but that comes in more from the writing style than it does from the characterization. Showa, Amare's best friend in the Sunken City, is so well developed and so interesting and so nuanced of a character that I do very much enjoy her, and every time that she was in the scene, it felt like her motivation was very clear, and it's not always just her motivation to do something for Amare. And I love that. I love when side characters have that, and it was really, really great to be able to watch that happen. I also really enjoyed the way that good and evil were malleable in this story, where it all just depended on who was saying what, basically, for where Amare's trust was and how she was interpreting the things that she was being told. It was a gradual adjustment to a completely new world of living underwater instead of on a pirate ship, and being in a place where there are different types of people and different reasons for conflict and all of these different things and different reasons to trust people, and navigating this whole new space and learning as you go. It's also a world that Amare is very impressionable in, where it's like, if you're nice to her, she's gonna trust you until she has a reason not to trust you. And if you are not nice to her, she won't trust you until she has a reason to trust you. So navigating those back and forths is very engaging to read. So now we're gonna go into the things that I think can be improved. A lot of the side characters, aside from Showa, do not feel very developed. They don't feel like they are actually doing anything for the story, and they could be replaced by pretty much any other character, especially some of the characters that are very close to Amare that we spend a lot of time with. They don't necessarily stand out from each other, and I don't love that. I do think side characters are very important to the feeling of honesty in your story and the ability to like immerse yourself in the story of feeling like it's a real world. And this just doesn't have that dedication to them. It made a lot of these side characters very bland and forgettable just because they were so vague. And I honestly, they could have been throwaway characters. They could have been like stand-ins. They're like pawns to the story, but they also seemed like they were more important the way that they were being used in the story. They're just not characters that I remember. And I feel like that's something that could definitely make the story stronger, is if the people in the world felt like people. This book is set up into 4 parts, and I genuinely do not understand it at all. I don't know why the breaks in the parts don't hold much significance, and it could just be a chapter break, but we just have these like part 1, part 2, part 3, part 4s popping up. I could see if it was split into 3 separate sections, because there are 3 types of physical experiences that Amare goes through, and having it separated into those 3 would make sense to me. I would probably label them, instead of like part 1, part 2, and part 3, I would probably label them like human or pirate, and then a princess, and then, not to spoil anything, at the end, I would name that last section off of that, something vague, but reference to the stage of life that she's in. And I think that would have made it better than having these somewhat arbitrary seeming sections in the story. I went back to the section breaks because I was reading it on my Kindle, so I had the like hyperlinks to see what changed between the chapter before it and the chapter after it, and I just can't figure anything out with that. The way that time passes in the story doesn't make any sense at all. And when they give you like, oh, this is how much time has passed, it's like, really? That's how much time has passed? And it's both in the scheme of like a long time and a very short time. And both of them are shocking, because it's like, there's no way that this much stuff happened in such a short period of time, or there's no way that nothing happened in such a long period of time, that it's so, I don't want to say arbitrary again, but it's very arbitrary in terms of like, okay, well, time has to pass. So time has passed, and this is how much time has passed. And I definitely think that could have been better. We could have had a clearer sense of time passing. We could have had more things that don't matter, I guess, in the times that are longer span of time, so you can feel the time passing, instead of being like, oh yeah, months have gone by, or whatever, but it's still a very short length of time. There are things that I think should happen more often in the span of time that are emotionally driven that don't happen. I think that she should have more of a difficult time adjusting to this new life than she does. She has a very difficult time, and then she just stops having a difficult time, and I don't love that because it feels disingenuous, and it makes the time passage feel fake. I think that if she was having more of a struggle of, I now live underwater, I can never see my pirate family ever again, they are never going to know what happens to me, and like going through that emotional distress through the transition before being like, okay, fine, I guess I'm a princess. I will just do whatever I want because I'm a princess. I think that emotional disconnect is part of why I don't feel like the pacing made sense, and it's coming a lot from the emotional way that things have happened, and not necessarily entirely from actual actions and activities that happen in the span of time. But the span of time also leads this to being an insta-love, which I am not a fan of. And I feel like it, given the experience that Amare has in the like surface world to the experience that she is now having in this underwater world, there is a level of confidence that I don't think she should have, which could just be me. Could just be my perspective on it, but it didn't feel like the right amount of time had passed for these things to be so comfortable for her. So that's my take on that. In terms of the writing, it felt lazy to me at times in a lot of different ways. Certain things felt lazy, like there wasn't enough effort put into it. Some examples that I have of that are certain descriptors of things just were not engaging in any way. So like having dialogue tags that are in it that don't really need to be in it and take away from the effort of the conversation or tell you that something is happening rather than showing you that something is happening. There were a lot of those moments where it was like, why are you telling me this? Why are you telling me this? You could have wrote 6 extra words and shown it instead, but you're telling me. And that drew me out several times because I was like, why are you being so lazy about this? And it could just be her style of writing. I think that this style of writing aligns a lot with something I would have written in high school, middle school, just for funsies, because it doesn't feel like there's a lot of thought going into how the language of the story. I think there's a lot of thought going into what the story is telling. And that's why I did finish the story, was because of the storytelling behind it. But the writing of it just did not feel up to the level that I was hoping for. Something else that's kind of in the realm of lazy writing is the fact that this is a totally new world. There is so much world building that is necessary because it's underwater. I don't live underwater. I don't know anybody who reads books that lives underwater. So this is a world that has a lot of things that we don't. And the need to explain how those things work, how those things are different, is important to the reader. And Amare also should know some of these things. She is curious about some of the things, but there are a lot of opportunities to give us some scenic descriptions and really build out the world. And it just is never taken up on. And I have the mental image from this book of a hallway of a cavern that has floating stands in it and like shop, like a farmer's market type of stand, that kind of thing floating in there that you can go shop at, and basically like just water and lights that dance in the water. That's pretty much all of the imagery that I have, and there's a lot of potential for different things to be described because we get names of places. There's like a garden. I don't really know what that looks like. I just sort of put in like a garden into water. I have no idea what any of that would have looked like. There's just so many opportunities to give a more visual experience, and we just don't have it. I think that's sad. I definitely think if this book had more of an experience of the world, it would have been like an additional star. Even if all of the other problems that I had with the writing were still there, if we had more experience of the world, I think it would have been a bigger impression on me as I'm reading it to give me this place to go. I didn't love that Amare was as impressionable as she is. She has to be. She doesn't know anything about this world, and she barely had any opportunity to know the world on the surface. So it makes sense that she's as naive as she is. I just wish that it were less of okay, we're talking to a new person, and so we're gonna have a totally new perspective on life because somebody has told me information that's completely different from what I was told before. So I'm gonna completely change my idea of how life is, and then we'll go from there. It's like whiplash every time a new character is introduced, and I get it. I understand. It's fine. It makes sense for the story. It just could have been a little bit more nuanced and a little bit less ping-pongy on the perspective situation. She could have maybe had a little bit more stance on herself and her own perception of things, but she didn't. So I just have to deal with that. So what can writers learn from this book? I know I've said a lot of things that I think could improve, but I do think that this is a good example of a story, and it just needed some more strength behind it in the technique of writing, in the creation of it. If you told me the story verbally, if you were just like, I'm gonna tell you a story, this is what's gonna happen. Oh, there's these characters and they're gonna go like this, and this is where it's underwater. I think this would be a really engaging story, but the fact that it is in the platform that it's in, it has the potential to be better than it is. And I think this is a good example of that. This book, because it was so creative in the story, in the conflicts, in the character, in the world, in the differences between the world of this story and the world of the real world, it was engaging enough to keep me reading So creativity outweighed technique in this, and this could be an example of when that is a viable option. I definitely think that if it had more technique, it would be a better book, but it is still engaging enough that I want to read the next 2 books in the series, at least as of right now. I don't know if I'll want to read the 3rd one after the 2nd book, but after this 1st book, I'm planning to read the rest of the series at some point. But it's the creativity of the concept that's making you want to read it, not the actual writing. So there are times that that's going to be something that is more valuable. It could just be something that is invested in later. I'm going to write the story, and it's not going to be the best way that a story's ever been told, but I'm going to write it and I'm going to see if I can get feedback on it and see if people are liking the story. Maybe people will. Maybe you'll be able to get a publishing deal and publish 3 books that maybe don't have the best writing because your storytelling is effective. I also think this is a prime example of why side characters are important, because Showa makes a huge impact on the story. Huge impact on the story. And the other side characters don't. So you get to see how that directly relates between the same story. You can see that firsthand of characters that aren't getting enough development and a character that does get enough development. I think it's also a good example of a flawed main character and using their flaws as a effective device for how the story is told rather than something that is working against the goals of the story, because Amare has a lot that's just like, she can't do anything about it. This is just who she is and how her brain works because of the life that she's lived. And she just has to navigate it. And that's what it is. And figuring out how she navigates it then creates new, interesting ways of telling this story that having her be somebody with more life experience might not have given her the opportunity to do. But that is all that I've got for you today. If you enjoyed this video, please leave a like. It'll really help me out. Have you heard of the Sunken City? I feel like I definitely wouldn't have if I hadn't won the giveaway, because I haven't really seen anything about it anywhere. I think it's a very interesting story with a very unique writing style. Sometimes that's what you need. If you don't want to miss any of my uploads, hit that subscribe button and the notification bell next to it.